Hi, I'm Brett Sparks from Unite the Union in the Southwest. And today is the first of what I hope is going to be a series of interviews with Unite members across the Southwest telling us their story. And I'm really, really pleased to have Ken Keable here with me in Yeovil to tell us the story of him being a London recruit. Okay, Ken, do you want to tell me about apartheid? What was it? What happened?
In 1909, the British Parliament passed the South Africa Act, 1909, which brought together four British colonies in the aftermath of the Boer War to form a new dominion, as they called it, in the British Empire, to be called the Union of South Africa. And this act of the British Parliament specified that South Africa would have a parliament of its own within the Dominion, but only for white people to vote. There were certain types of people known as Cape Coloureds who were allowed to vote on which white people would represent them, but not to actually have membership themselves in that parliament. So it was Britain that introduced institutional racism into South Africa, the Union of South Africa, from the outset. And that's very important to recognise. Britain is up to its neck in the crime of apartheid, if we go back on it historically. The set of laws known as the apartheid laws got everybody allocated to a racial group. And the racial group which you were allocated to, depending on your race, so-called race, determined whether you were allowed to vote, where you were allowed to live or not allowed to live, how much money the government would spend on your education, which kind of jobs you could do and not do, who you could have sexual relations with or marry, all this kind of thing. Complete set of totally racist policies. In 1967, I was approached by a leading official of the Young Communist League, the London District Secretary, George Bridges, who asked me if I was willing to do something illegal. And this came as quite a surprise to me. We had a very cautious conversation about it, which resulted in him saying, look, I'd like you to go on a short visit to South Africa and take part and help there in what way you can. Well, I said I'd sleep on it and let him know in the morning. It was a big decision. And the following day, I approached him and I said, I've got my final exams coming up for the City University in January of 1968. And when I got those done, I'll be available. I thought the chances of me getting caught were very small because this idea was so brilliant. Why would the authorities be on the lookout for someone like me entering the country if they thought the ANC was going to, was wanting to get into the country and would be sending black people in? And the idea for the authorities, for the police and so on, of a white person not being a racist like them was strange. They just assumed everybody who was white and who was coming on a visit to South Africa anyway was a racist like them. Actually, 3 of the London recruits were in fact arrested in 1972 and tortured. There was Alex Mumbaris, who's Greek-Australian, and his wife, Marie-José Mumbaris, who died just recently. Alex was in jail for 7 years. You can read his story online, actually, Escape from Pretoria, and there was a film made based upon it as well, also called Escape from Pretoria. His wife, Marie-José, was French, and she was pregnant at the time, and she was released probably quite early on, probably because of pressure from the French government. And then there was Sean Hosey, who was a member of the Young Communist League, Irishman, a little younger than me, and he was arrested while trying to bring some money and some false documents to somebody in South Africa in 1972. I was very honoured at the fact that he'd asked me. I realised he'd singled me out for this very important job. And I felt very pleased in another way as well, because I'd always been a bit of an odd one out. And now I was being offered a job for which I was very well suited. I had the necessary political commitment and understanding, and that was very, very important. So after the exams were out of the way in early 1968, George Bridges introduced me to Ronnie Casrills, who is now quite a famous person. Um, he's about 5 years older than me, and he was in an exile in London at that time. I started meeting Ronnie separately to decide how I was going to go to South Africa and what I was prepared to do. So Ronnie gave me this false bottom suitcase. It contained 1,200 letters which were addressed to the Indian community. I didn't even know before then that there was an Indian community at that time. I hadn't seen the film Gandhi, which shows them very, very well. But so it had 1,200 letters. It didn't have the stamps on, but it had all the addresses on. It was addressed to Indian businesses, Indian mosques and temples, Indian restaurants and so on, and clubs. It was appealing to the Indian people in South Africa to rally round the ANC and prepare for struggle and so on. I got my tickets and I flew to Johannesburg, booked in a hotel for a few nights, and I went all around the city planning my routes to decide where I was going to post these letters. The whole idea was that they were from London, but they were going to look as if they were coming from inside South Africa. So, because if a person received a letter from London, that was a bit suspicious anyway. Well, it could be suspicious depending. So there's that letter. I went around planning my route because I had to post bunches of these letters in different places. Then I put a do not disturb notice on my hotel room door and began sticking. I bought some stamps and I began sticking stamps on the letters. I painted nail varnish on my pads of my fingers, transparent stuff, neutral stuff, so that I wouldn't leave any fingerprints. And so I did that, and then when I was ready, I went around the city posting the bunches of these letters in various places, and then I flew home again. I didn't tell anybody about it at all. It's a secret I kept, and so I knew it was very, very important that the authorities wouldn't know that what this came from London, you know.
So you mentioned that there was that film. I know that this story has spurred loads of different things to come out of it, not least the book, the great book that you edited yourself there, but also I understand there's a film now, isn't there, telling the story. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
When I reached the age of 60 in 2005, I asked myself the question, what have I got to do before I die, which a lot of people do at that age. And as soon as I asked it, I knew the answer. I got to tell the story that I'd kept secret all that time about what I did in South Africa, because I'd only told like about 3 or 4 very close family members about it, and none of the other people involved had written or spoken anything about it at all. Everyone had a deeply seated habit of keeping it silent, long after it was necessary to keep it silent, actually, but we just did. So I sat down and started to write my story, and at some stage I thought to myself, no, I won't just get that story published. What I'll do is I'll try and track down all the other people who were involved doing something similar, get them to write their stories and put them all in a book. And whatever happens is bound to be an interesting book. That's all. I didn't think any further than that. Well, I'll say now that it came led on to a film. After the book was published in 2012, about 2 years later, we started to get inquiries from people who wanted to make a film out of it. It's worth saying a little more about why it's important.
Yeah.
Especially why it's important to the trade union movement. It's got 2 themes, basically. The first one is anti-racism, obviously, and that is a tremendously important thing. I mean, at the moment, we've got the government using this a Rwanda policy, which is designed, in my view, to appeal to the racist element in the British electorate. You know, they're using racism. Racism is always a problem for a challenge for the trade union movement. And this film is about that. It's about that. This story is about that. And I think it has the capacity to inspire people. I hope inspire people and young people especially. The other thing it's about is more complicated, more subtle. That's international solidarity. It's about that, and it's solidarity of white people, mostly working class white people, with the black people of the global south, the people of the former British colonies and all the colonial peoples. And that is a concept which which people need to discuss and understand. Why were these people? Who were these people who did this thing? What were their motives? And they've expressed it often in their stories in the book. What were their motives? Why did they do it? And how important is it now? How relevant it is? The relevance, I think, it demonstrated by what's going on in Gaza at the moment, and the tremendous level of solidarity there is for the people of Gaza in Britain and throughout the world, so that governments have had to change their policies.
Predominantly, the London recruits were young men, but there were women involved as well, weren't they?
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit more about the women that were involved in it?
Yes, some of them set off leaflet bombs in South Africa. Some of them transported smuggled weapons. A film you can download from the website, the main London Recruits website, called Secret Safari, and that is about a major weapons smuggling operation that was done in the late 1980s. Really, really interesting film, award-winning film, and that includes some women who were drivers driving a special vehicle that was used apparently to show tourists around southern Africa, but in fact was was carrying weapons all the time. One of the women of London recruits was Mary Chamberlain, who's now quite an accomplished novelist, in fact. And she and her partner were they received and were smuggling into the country several hundred booklets, and at one point she was moving some of these from a flat to a van or the other way about. I don't know what it was, and a policeman spoke to her, and so she conversed with him, and he offered to help her, and he lifted up her bag, and he said, "I don't know what you women carry in your bags," but it was all these pamphlets, Communist Party pamphlets, in fact, hundreds of them, and he was just trying to help, like, that was funny. There were some people who were very, very anxious that our role should not be overstated. They were very modest about what they'd done. I didn't want anyone to think that we were white saviours, and the South African people couldn't liberate themselves without help of white saviours. But after the book was published, 2012, as soon as it was out, there was a few more people coming forward who we didn't know about. One example, there were two women who both worked at the London School of Printing, Mary Chamberlain, who I already mentioned, and Joy Lehman. And they had shared an office for 10 years and been friends. Neither one knew that the other one had been to South Africa. All that time they kept it total secret. And, this sort of thing is just rather wonderful.